Hey guys, thanks for checking us out at Brothers of Merit. This is Brandon Collier. I'm the host and founder of the show. We got a good one here for you tonight. I brought my buddy Taylor in. I like to call him a true friend, but he's also a true disciple. Since my walk began a few years ago, Taylor has been an integral part of walking with me and guiding me more towards God. So I wanted to bring him in, and tonight we wanted to talk about actually a really cool topic, which is the evolution of brotherhood. And I think that really hits the nail on the head because of Brothers of Merit. The name of the podcast and what I'm trying to achieve with this podcast is a true brotherhood through God to bring us all closer together. So Taylor's a pretty cool guy, and I wanted to really utilize what he's gone through in his life and his skills and his knowledge of God and his bring up and everything that he's gone through to help achieve that, which is spread the gospel to everyone. So before we do it, I just wanted to thank you guys for checking us out. This is episode 3, and I'm super excited to get this episode out to you guys. So without further ado, Taylor Dooley, everyone.
Hey, what's up?
So Taylor, if you could, kind of just give us a rundown of who you are, what you do for a living, background on you, quick testimony, just so the guys can really hear, what you're about.
Sure.
So,
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me here, having me on. I definitely don't deserve that intro, so I'm like humbled to hear it, so I appreciate those words, man. That's awesome. Yeah, so my name's Taylor Dooley. I also live here in Hampstead, the same neighborhood as Brandon. Our houses are literally identical, just streets apart. With my wife and my 2 daughters, we have one more on the way.
congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Um, and I work at Under Armour down in the city in Baltimore. So I work on footwear. So it's fun. I get to talk about sports and stuff, which is something I'm passionate about. I guess like testimony, just real quick, like I grew up in a Christian home. I accepted Christ when I was 5, I think. One of those, like, I was coming home from church and the pastor just talked about like going to hell, and I didn't want to do that. So
Yeah,
it
no one
was
wants to do that.
more or less, exactly. It was more or less fire insurance. Like, it was more like get out of jail free card until when I was in high school. And that's when like my faith really became real. That was founded a lot through some brothers that came into my life. Not my literal brothers, they were super influential as well. We'll get there, but some guys that I ran close with, and they helped to like form me into the man that I am today. I'm super like humbled and grateful for them. And so like brotherhood in general, like I guess like why we're talking about this, like has been a huge part of my testimony. It's been a huge part of not doing this alone, of getting into fellowship and having real deep meaningful relationships with other guys, and the whole iron sharpening iron, and really walking through this life together has been influential for me. So
Absolutely, and that's a good point. And I mentioned you guys in the first episode. Taylor is part of that group of 9 men that I put together post the men's retreat weekend from our church. So, but prior to that, though, background from where we are, Taylor and I have been friends for about 3 years now since I came to Hampstead from Harford County. And Taylor is one of the first guys that I got to know, besides John, another man that you guys will probably hear from eventually, but he's in the group as well. So Taylor has been influential from the very beginning of when I accepted Christ. So that's why I wanted to bring him on. Taylor's idea, actually, he's the one who brought this topic up of brotherhood, and I thought there's no better topic to talk about at the beginning of Brothers of Merit than Brotherhood. So we kind of broke it down into 4 stages. So the first stage we're kind of going to hit on is boyhood, growing up before you become a young man and progress into that. And then second would be young manhood. Third would be our marriages. And then fourth would be the kids and on. And that's where we are all at now, obviously, is in the kids stage. So let's go ahead and dig in to stage 1, which is the boyhood. I know where I come from boyhood wise, but Taylor, I want to hear from you. Just give me, a rundown of your boyhood, where you started from as a child, and what events as a child can you say were influential to you and also helped you progress in your walk with God, and what could other men then bring back from their boyhood and relate to you about?
sure. Yeah, I mean, for me, I guess boyhood, especially in the terms of like manhood, brotherhood, like what you're trying to like accomplish with this podcast and like inspiring people. Boyhood of those 4 stages is like the easy one. right? Like that's when like becoming friends with other like boys or anyone, that's that your entire existence, right? And I think it's like crucial to like if you're gonna look at brotherhood as a whole throughout the span of our lives, looking back at what it looked like when we were children, and all we had on our entire agenda was to run outside and play kickball. You know what I mean? Like,
Get dirty.
and that's it. Like that's what it's supposed to look like. Life gets in the way and we it doesn't become as easy anymore. So like for me, like the main point for me with that is just like laying out the foundation of like when you were a kid, you didn't want to just sit by yourself and do nothing. You wanted to be with your friends. You wanted to be playing cops and robbers. You wanted to be playing baseball. You wanted to just be running around playing tag. And that's kind of the whole point of what we want to then continue to do through the rest of our lives.
So, on that note, where would you say, and I know this is progressing into a latter stage, but I'm going to ask the question now because we're in the boyhood stage. Where would you say the disconnect then came from boyhood, where you're trying to be around boys and just get dirty and play soccer and do all that fun stuff, to where some of us sit now, where we're not, I wouldn't say we're isolated, but sometimes we either lack men in our life? How could you think that the disconnect came from for that?
I mean, I think back then, let me think about it. When I was 7, I wasn't trying to be thoughtfully intentional about growing relationships with other people. You know what I mean? Like with other dudes. I wasn't out there thinking like, "Oh, I need to get into a conversation with my other friend here on a deeper level." It was just like, I want to play and I want to be with my friends. You know what I mean? And so there was no intentionality or no extra effort required. But once we get older, obviously, everything starts to pull us in different directions. And so then you actually have to be thoughtful about what you're going to spend your time doing, who you're going to spend your time with. You know, the old saying, like, you are who you hang out with. That is something that, like, you actually have to be thoughtful about once there's a ton more options than just the people who your parents bring you around or who you live next to. Because those were really your options when you were kids. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. So then you were at that point, I wouldn't say you were forced to, but by default, that's who you hung out with and played with and all because you couldn't hop in your car, run down the street. So when you approach manhood now you have your own freedoms.
Million options.
You can make your own decisions. And sometimes your influences can be based off of external influence, as in, I hate to say this, but whether it's social media, that it's sad, but you can then influence who you hang out with based off of popularity and things like that. So it may, a facade, it may seem like, you're having a great relationship with someone, but deep down, you're not fulfilling that brotherhood or you're not fulfilling that true friendship that you're seeking because you're just doing it for a external view rather than how you internally feel. So that's a good point.
Like it says in the Bible to come to me with I like with faith like a child, remembering what it looked like when we were kids. Like that's how God designed us to be, was arm in arm with other brothers. You know what I mean? And then like I think like it's awesome that like you see even people responding to this podcast that you're doing, because like that's something that we crave. It's something that we want. It's something that like as men we need is other brothers alongside of us. The reason why we wanted to start with boyhood, like we talked about, is it was easy back then. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And now and so it's just remembering that's all we're doing. That's all we're doing is we're just hanging out with our friends and we're just talking about things that are going on in our lives the same as we did back then.
It's just the
It's
things
just
going on now, just they have more of a
matter a whole
effect
lot
and they
more.
matter more.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you bring up, you're just basically a big kid or whatever. But if you guys remember back in the first episode, I told you a lot of this stemmed from that men's retreat weekend and being the boys that we were that night. We played to be inside the gym till midnight. So just bringing those little tiny things back, that's what helped us connect. And it's so funny. Mike Farner, he's another guy in our group, mentioned a few weeks back that it's amazing how much more bonding and connecting you can do after you do something physically demanding. And you and I were talking about that previously as well. That you do a workout or you play a game or you do some competitive and things like that. It makes you bond and connect that much more, that faster and quicker, and it's really cool. And it's I think it's the physical aspect in men. We drive and strive for that physical contact and just to really dig in and get to it. So I think that could be why.
100%. And I think that's actually a great segue into stage two. And the reason why I say that is because in Proverbs 17 it says a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. So like a friend loves at all times, right? It's easy to just be a friend and love at all times, but a brother, like taking you that next level deeper, is born through adversity. And through, like, I'm a firm believer of you get closer to people through like blood, sweat, and tears. Like
That's,
that's why, like,
yeah.
when you look at like first responders and military, like both of those, both of those worlds intimately, or even sports teams or anything like that. That's why like teams and that in those settings are so close, and that's why that brotherhood is formed in those settings, is because you go through stuff together. And so the cool thing, and then it starts to happen in stage two. That's why I want to talk about it then, is it doesn't have to just be like a sports game or a battle or a fire that is the adversity. Sometimes life is just that adversity. You know
Absolutely.
what I mean?
And that's the 99% reason for this podcast is
Right.
for life. Life's daily battles that we're facing as men. And that's why we hash it out in this podcast and dig into that because that's what we're all face. You know what I mean? We all don't face issues on the soccer field anymore like we used to or the basketball courts or things like that. It's we're facing lust, pornography, adultery, alcohol, drugs. I mean, that's everywhere now in today's world. And that's some heavy hitting stuff. So that's what we face now as men. So that's why this podcast is pretty paramount, I think, to not just Christian men, but all men. You know what I
100%.
mean? So as we segue into stage two is your young manhood into your college and your beginning work years. So you have the foundation from boyhood, and as you transition into this young manhood, there's so many transformations that you're going through as a young man at this point. You know, you're getting into your teens, your upper teens, and then you're getting ready to start college, which is a whole new world to people and men that we haven't experienced yet. So when we sit here and we look at our young manhood, what can you say from your experiences at that time? What did you go through? Because this is the stage where you accepted Christ. So this is a really big stage and really big time of your life. And I'm sure many of the listeners, you guys probably went through the same exact thing. Some of you maybe even before that, some of you after. But for the listeners that did accept Christ and start walking with Him at this point, tell us your story and how maybe it relates to theirs and what you went through.
Sure. And I mean, and it doesn't necessarily have to be chronologically along with everybody else. This stage could happen at any point, but you're right. For me, it happened at that point when I was in high school. That's when I actually like decided to dig my heels in and decide like this is it. I'm gonna do this Christian thing and I'm gonna try to live for Jesus. So one of the big things like for me, and again, just to reiterate, like I have no business like being the one to talk about this stuff. Like I'm by no means an expert on it. One of the big things for me was I had a close group of friends that decided to take it intentionally to a deeper level. We decided they were guys that I did everything with. I played soccer with, did everything from youth groups. We did clubs. Our parents were friends. We hung out at each other's houses. Everything that you could do back then when you were in high school and you were just doing stuff. We did together, and it wasn't any one of us that was like, let's take this in. It was a group decision to like. I mean, we had Bible studies every Tuesday night. We would come over to one of the three of our
I think
houses,
that's awesome.
and
That's
we
so
would
cool.
decide to roll deep. And we're like, we're gonna get into this thing, and
So
we're
you're
gonna
having a
actually.
small group in
Right.
high school before you guys really knew what they were. I mean, at that point, you're
Right.
creating your own,
Yeah.
which is awesome.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's
100%. And it was a lot influenced because and we at that time, our youth group at the time, our youth pastor was hugely influential. All three of us would say he was one of our best friends, and he like inspired us to do stuff like that. He inspired us to take steps further.
and that it's not to interrupt, but
No,
having
go.
a youth pastor, I think, and that's why I think youth pastors' roles in the church are extremely, extremely important because they're so influential on young adults that are so out in the world. They're trying to learn everything that they can. So you have to have, I think, a good youth pastor. So you having your pastor that was very connected with you guys, that brought you guys in, that was close with you, I think that's huge because that makes you want to drive and that makes you want to accept Christ more, walk with him more, and you have someone to look up to in a big world because at that
Yeah.
point you're trying to learn the world, but you're also trying to learn God,
Right.
and that's huge. And you're already going through changes in your body with girls that you're starting think about, and just I think that's awesome that you had a pastor that was there for you guys. So sorry to interrupt,
No,
but
no.
that
And to piggyback on that point, I don't think it necessarily needs to be a pastor. I think just anyone, like you've said on the podcast here before, like this doesn't just have to be for Christian men. It's not necessarily like this is what we believe. I don't, and I hope you do, and I hope you get there. I'm not at all saying you shouldn't, but that it doesn't have to be a pastor is what I'm saying. I think that God designed us to grow best when there is people leading us, so people like above us who know more than us, people that we're walking alongside,
with yeah.
and then people that we are also discipling and mentoring in. So you have like three levels of it, and you're in the middle of
That's
that
cool.
sandwich. So
Yeah.
there's people over top of you. For me, that was my youth pastor at the time. Doesn't have to necessarily be a youth pastor for somebody, but for like I said, for so he was super influential, and to had us just thinking about stuff that people don't think about at that age. And since we were doing it together, it was easier because every week we were getting together and we were diving into the Word and we were asking each other questions like, "What did you do to show Jesus to somebody last week?" And I knew that on Tuesday I was gonna have to answer to Tyler and Matt about like what that looked like. And so if like a month went by when I was like, "Yeah, I haven't done anything," like that's not okay. Like you know what I mean? Like we're in this group, we're doing this thing together because we want to be answering we want to be showing Jesus to people. Like I remember vividly, like I don't know why this is the one that sticks out to my head, but my brother Matt, he told us one time that he was in Target and he was like walking the aisles and randomly saw some person and he felt like God was saying he wanted to go pray for that person, like go talk to that
Reach out.
person and go, just whatever. Never seen him before in his life. And Matt was like, I know this is the stirring, like I want to go, but like the typical thing, like when you don't, like that's super weird. Like I don't want to do that.
The awkward because you
Right.
don't know. Yeah, I understand.
And he said yes, like all right. And he went over and he like prayed for him and like I don't remember this specific situation, but like they were like going through something and they like needed someone to like just be there and listen to him. God clearly put Matt in that target to talk to that person and he said yes to him. And I'm not taking anything away from Matt. Matt's one of the most awesome godly men I know, but Matt just said yes to that, and I strongly believe that that's because of us going through that together. Like it says in Ecclesiastes, like two is better than one, and cord to three strands is not easily broken. And I think, you know what I mean? Like I think the fact that, like I said, on Tuesday he's gonna have to say like, hey, what did I do? Like, hey, this is how I was Jesus.
Which, on that note, that's another awesome thing is accountability. So at a young age, you're then learning accountability of the other men that you're walking with, and that's a huge thing that we talk about and practice in our group of men is accountability. And that's the coolest thing is that when you have a group of men together, you can hold each other accountable because this group, as I told you guys, started from a small group, and the small groups that was our wives and us. It was a couples group. So we didn't just have a small group and then we decided to become friends because it was men at the first and then throughout it was all men. It was our wives and us. And then we decided to branch out and make this group. So when I say we're a group of men, we're also a group of friends. So as I reiterated from the first episode, if you guys are ever feeling a calling for that, I recommend that you do it. Don't wait. Don't worry about what other people may think, or if you have a group of men that you see in sight that you think you could either disciple or be discipled from, or just want to walk with, join them. Have them join
Yeah.
you. Start a group. It doesn't have to be on the books with the church. I mean, it doesn't have to be a small group. Ours isn't a small group per se. It's just a group that we meet once a week because once a week may sound like, oh, that's not a lot. But when you are all have kids and wives, and we all know that how life gets in the way of things, like that's awesome for us because in that time, that's the only time we get. So when we get together on a Tuesday night from 8 o'clock until midnight or sitting around a fire and just, talking shop and life and hold each other accountable, that's what you need as a man.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
And
So,
just to, since Brandon's probably too humble with himself on here, like just to give an outside perspective. With all this, like I've done a lot of things not right. These are just some of the things that have helped me a ton, and it's because of other brothers that I had in my life. And that's been one of the coolest things for me is like through watching this Brothers of Merit start. Through you starting that, like one of the coolest things is to watch like someone who I can call a brother do something that like I would not have the stones to do. So to everybody listening, that like if you have any idea of like, man, I want that. Like I want a group of guys. It takes an incredible amount of intentionality and courage and bravery to like actually get it started and to not just have it turn into like guys night out or whatever. And because that's not beneficial. That's not, you're not doing anything that's actually taking things to a deeper level. And Brandon was like, to witness like him getting into that stage where he was ready to just be like, you know what, let's make this happen, let's do it, has been huge for me, and like has been huge for all of us as a part of that. Like I said, I just a commend Brandon on that, and B, if you have any idea of like, man, I wish I had that, maybe that's someone upstairs telling you that you're the one that's supposed to start it.
Absolutely. And if anyone listening has, questions or anything about that, that's what the Facebook group that I created is for, you know what I mean? Just shoot me a message, shoot the group a message, seek me out. I'm here to help anyone, and that's the point of this podcast. It's not for me, it's for you. It's to spread the word, spread the gospel, and to help anyone and everyone that I can progress as men of faith. So I thank you for those words, Taylor. It was definitely a step that I'm glad we took. I mean, for instance, as I told you guys, just because we're Christians doesn't mean we're not men as well. So we go through the
Yeah.
same exact thing that all men and the next person does. So, for instance, right now, one of the brothers in our council that we're working with, he's trying to quit tobacco, and he is now on day 16. And I have been with him, every single step of the way because I too went through that same exact thing, and he's doing phenomenal. So, him listening to this, Mike, keep trucking, man. You're doing great. And anyone else that you can do it. Anyone that's trying to go against an addiction, there's issues in their lives, you can do this. And with the help of other brothers, it makes it even easier to do.
Yeah.
Trying to do something alone is one of the hardest things that I think to go through, whether it's an addiction, whether it's just a daily family issue that you have or a reoccurring issue that you have or something even deeper. Seek out, and having other men in your life is a phenomenal move that you can make,
Hmm.
to
And
bring
that's
men in.
and that's sorry to
No, no,
that's
no.
I mean, that's it. Like, a brother's born from adversity, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like that's 100% it. Also, I mean, it's life happens. Like, what happens if like a parent dies, or God forbid one of your kids, or like something like that, like life, like serious life stuff that like causes adversity. When then you have brothers that can walk beside you through that,
They will be with you.
they're going to be there with you. It's going to be a whole lot easier to see God work through it, or just in general, you're not meant to go through that alone. And that's when you are going through things like that alone, that's when you need to turn to something, and that's when things happen that then you need to get out of addictions and things like that. But if you can turn to a brotherhood
Instead
that
of
can
that,
hold you up, and they can sometimes all the brotherhood is there for and needs to be is to just like curl up in that pain cave and just look, we're hurting there with you. That's it. And then sometimes it's, hey, we're gonna pick you up out of this pain cave, and we're gonna carry you forward, and we're gonna
exactly.
be there to pick you up.
And other times it's going to be, I'm going to tell you some things that you're not going to like,
Right.
but you need to hear
That's a
them,
good word.
and it's going to help you in the long run. So I can tell you now, brother Mike, that's going through this quitting nicotine. I'm sure a couple times I've called him. He probably doesn't want to hear from me because he's on edge. But you know what? He's stuck with me, and he knows that I'm there. I'm there for the long haul. There's no getting rid of me right now. And luckily enough, it sounds like we got some little tight town, which we do. We live in Hampstead, so it's incredibly small. But brother Mike lives 2 courts over from us right now.
Right.
So I mean, it's awesome. You know, we'll move on to stage 3, but that was some good stuff. I really really liked that stage that we talked about, the young manhood into college, because the hard part is now is that what happens when you move this college to stage 3s and 4s, which is marriage and kids with college on top, because that's what I'm going through now, is finishing my bachelor's degree during stages 3 and 4. So it has been a not a struggle, but it's definitely been on edge. I mean, it's life. It's tough, but we're getting through it. So when I say on edge, that's a segue into the marriage part. My wife has been with me every step of the way, and she's been great. She's been phenomenal. She's been my rock, and she has been for the past 10 years. So, Taylor, what can you tell me? Tell me a little bit about your marriage, how long you guys have been together, how you met, and what can you tell me experiences with your wife that have led you closer to God and your walk with Him, and maybe how has it drawn her? So when other men are listening to this, they can think, well, this isn't just about me, it's also about my wife or significant other. How can I help my wife draw closer to God if she's not already? Because yours is. Amber's an awesome girl. She's close with God. But what about those men that don't necessarily have that connection yet or are trying to achieve that?
Sure. Yeah, that's awesome. And there's a ton there to unpack. And if I have been not an expert in the first two, then being an expert in marriage is by far the furthest thing that I am from. But I've been married for about almost 6 years, I guess, in May. And it's like, I don't know, it's like the coolest learning experience of my whole life. It's 5 years ago, I didn't know half of what I know today. So, what has grown us a ton through all that is through going through times of adversity, and is through growing together through that stuff, and is through me learning that as a man and as the man and the leader in my family, I need to step up and I need to be that for my wife. Because just as much as there is people out there that are, wanting to lead and get their wife to be in that same category, there is wives that want their husbands to step up. I was much closer to the latter half of that, where it's just easy. I mean, I think everyone can relate to, like, it's easy to just fall into the treadmill of life and to let intentionality and, like, leading my wife in spiritually in anything, not just letting her take care of everything, like all that stuff is easy to just let fall by the wayside. And as Reed, our pastor, like he said in a recent sermon, no one drifts towards doing things you're supposed to be doing. So if you're not paying attention to it, you're drifting away from
Away
that.
from it.
Right. And so you're drifting away from it, and you're turning into someone that your wife is sitting there like, I wish he would lead us in devotions, or I wish he would get his lazy butt up off the couch and he would help me. I wish that he would blah 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 blah. And I think the real big thing here is to be incredibly intentional, is to also then take that real introspective look in at yourself and be like, you know what? That's me. And instead of just sitting around with the boys in a bar on Saturday night complaining about how my wife is nagging me, it's time to step up and actually be the leader and the man that I need to be. And the absolute biggest thing that's helped me through that is brothers in my life. It's other guys that I've been walking with, doing married life together, encouraging each other when it's not easy.
Because it's easy to get distracted.
Right,
I mean, you can
that's
get
what I'm saying.
distracted from marriage, which it sounds bad because you say distracted from marriage, and you don't want to sit there and think like you don't love your
No,
wife or whatever. But it's so easy to disconnect if you're not trying to
right.
connect. You know what I mean? So like
Mm-hmm.
if you're not trying to engage with your wife, you're going to inadvertently and not knowingly you're going to be disconnecting. And you're going to be separating and dividing your marriage by just not trying. You may not know you're not trying, but you are. So that's where communication comes in the key. So what do you think would be some good advice to whether it's single men or someone that's with a significant other that aren't married yet, or communicating with your wife with God, because that's one thing that's come strong with me is my wife and I talk about God and our relationships with God and what we think a lot more now.
That's
So
a good word.
could you give me any advice, or the men any advice on talking with your wife with or about God?
I wish. No, I'm just joking.
Yeah,
Um,
I know.
if
We're all
if
seeking those
anybody
answers.
has the answer to that and they want to write in, then we'd be more than happy to hear it.
Yes, Facebook that to us now.
Yeah. Um, no, the only thing that I can think of is to just, when it's hard and when it's easy to not do it, to disengage, like you said, to worry about yourself, is to just not. And when it comes to, like, specifically, like, talking about God, having a relationship with your wife where, like, you're going spiritually deeper, and you are talking about things that matter, and you're talking about things of spiritual depth, and you're praying together, and you're going through devotions and things like that, that's going to take your marriage to a whole nother level. And that is going to make, not only bring you two closer together, but then God's going to use you to influence lives around you. And so obviously Satan doesn't like that. I'm a firm believer in the fact that he doesn't like that, and he wants to stop that. I mean, the Bible says we're not unaware of his schemes. Like, he's good at what he does as the master of evil, and he knows that stopping communication between husband and wife is the way to stop that from growing, right? And it's easy to do because it's easy because we're selfish, we're human beings. It's easy for us to just get caught up in, like, I had a long day at work and I had to commute home and now I just want to relax.
And not deal with the kids and not deal
Exactly.
with you. And
And the easiest thing to do is forget about it. So the hardest thing to do is to actually, show up and decide to like cut through all that and to actually just have uncomfortable conversations sometimes. It's to bring things up that just feel weird. Because one of the things that I've always heard, and I always thought like, okay, sure, whatever, this is just what people say. But like your wife wants you to do that. Like your
Oh
wife is
yeah.
sitting there like dying for you to have an actual conversation with her about it. And like getting over your pride, getting over whatever it is, and having that is going to take your marriage to a whole nother level. That's just is something that I don't know, it's somewhere you want to be. I don't even know what to say
Yeah,
about that.
no, and I think it's pretty cool because you and Amber have walked with God for a lot longer than I have, and my wife has, but I did not. It wasn't until a few years ago that I did. So I can talk with those that are listening to this podcast that do not. You're not of faith right now, and maybe you're in a relationship like mine was, where you're not of faith, but your wife is. I can tell you firsthand, my wife and I have been together 10 years, and the first seven of that, I was not with Christ. So I can see the noticeably huge difference between our marriage for those 7 years and then 3 years in the past.
Right.
I can tell you guys that having those conversations, praying with your wife, and really digging into your relationship with God and what you two are meant to be as followers of God in love with
Yeah.
God and with each other. I mean, it just takes your marriage to an entirely different level. I mean, obviously every couple's going to have scuffles. They're all going to have bickers and fights, and that's human. You're going to have it, but it makes those. I don't want to say it's easier. Well, yeah, that's easier to overcome those fights that we have because at the end of the day, we know that it's all tiny compared to the big picture, and that is, hey, you and I are fighting about who left the toothpaste cap off, but God loves us. You know what
Right.
I mean? Like, and that sounds so cliche, but it's so true.
Sure.
There's so many little things in life we worry about. For what? You know what I mean? At the end of the day, you just need to worry about one, loving God, two, loving your wife, and three, loving your kids. You love them all the same,
Yeah.
but it's God, your wife, and your kids. And somebody listening to this may be like, "What do you mean you love your kids are after your wife?" Well,
100%, man.
you got to remember your wife came before your kids, and you break that relationship, fellas, with your wives, you might as well it'll break it with your kids. So I think that is a great segue now to our last stage, which is four,
Well
which would be
done.
our
Well
kids
done.
stage. You know what I mean? Kids have been, oh man, kids have been the best thing to ever happen to us, and you know that. You're expecting your third, so congratulations on that. Everyone be praying for Taylor. Kids, I think, can also bring a relationship with God closer together. I can tell you firsthand, and I know you can too, and other men can relate to this, that praying with your kids, reading the Bible with your kids, doing it as a family has brought us so closer, in faith as a family.
Sure.
So for those men out there that may be wondering that, I believe that all kids in today's age should grow up in the church. That's how I view it because Satan is out there in so many ways nowadays. It is insane with this social media movement and just the nasty people that are out there and just all the things that are at our kids' fingertips. They are out there to get our kids, and they need to be in the four walls of the church, I believe, so that they can grow up stronger. They can have a relationship with God, and He can guide them down the right path away from all the bad things. And they have their guardrails set up, which we talked about last episode. So, what can you tell me about your feelings on kids walking with God and how you walk with God and your wife now with kids in the picture and in your lives?
Yeah. I mean, I think that like the greatest responsibility that we're going to have in this lifetime is raising them. And I think that that's something that can't be taken lightly at all. I mean, it says in Ephesians, it's talking about just us, as people, not necessarily talking about parents or kids, but it says in Ephesians, it says, Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the width and length and depth and height, to know the love of Christ which passes knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. That's like our responsibility as parents to get our kids to a point where they can be rooted and grounded in that love, and so that they can understand and that they can begin to comprehend it. And obviously, I'm not God's the one who's going to work in their hearts. And if your parents didn't root you in that, that doesn't mean that God can't work. If you're not doing that for your kids, it doesn't mean God can't work. It doesn't mean that, whatever. God's the one who's talking to hearts, is what I'm trying to say, I guess. But
Absolutely.
knowing the love that Christ has for us, like the full depth of that. I mean, it comes from, like I said, being rooted and grounded in love. And so that's our job as parents, to ground our kids in that. I mean, Crossroads does a lot of really cool things. That's our church. Does a lot of really cool things with our kids.
Absolutely, they
As
do.
far as just the program that they teach them on Sunday mornings, but also just giving us stuff at home to talk to our kids about. One of the really cool things that Amber's actually doing with our girls this year is she has laid out 5 memory verses that she wants the girls to memorize, and so we're all memorizing as a family. We're doing it with the girls, and
That's pretty neat.
so that's the bit of advice I can give you going back to marriage, is to marry someone that's way better than you, and that's what I
Oh,
did.
yes.
And
And we both did.
that's the only thing I got.
Thank goodness we
Um,
did.
like I said, I think it's the biggest responsibility that we have, is to pass that on to our kids. And um,
Legacy.
legacy is everything, right? Like,
Absolutely.
when we're gone, I mean, let's be honest. There's like 40 people alive that are going to be like written about and cared about 100 years from now, right? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to be written about in a history book because of just the life that I led. That doesn't mean that it's not important, but how that's going to get passed on is going to be through the legacy of my
Of
kids.
our,
And
absolutely.
how
Yep.
my kids then raise their kids speaks about how I raised my kids. And how my girls, like, grow up and they handle money, how they handle a household, how they work, and how they love God and how they love others, and how they are the love of Jesus to the people that they come in contact with. That is the legacy that Christ working through me and Amber is through
Yeah.
them.
You're absolutely right, and I think that that is huge. Being a parent is that one word, legacy, and I love that. And I think that is a good place to kind of wrap it up today with, for the men to think about, is what legacy do you want to leave for your kids? You know what I mean? And I don't want to say I was a bad father before I became the Christ, because I don't think I was, but I see now that I am a better father.
100%.
You're so critical on yourself. You critique yourself the hardest. So maybe I may be saying that a little harsh, but I am a better father now. So I really do think that for all men listening to this, what's your legacy to your children? If you're going to be a father, if you are a father, one day you're going to be a father. What do you want to leave, and how do you want to guide your children through God, and how is He working through you to work and show them what paths to take in life?
Right.
So
And I think one of the cool things, just to tie it real quick back to
yeah,
the brotherhood thing, is like, none of us have been parents before, right? Like, I've been a parent for, almost 4 years next month, because that's how old Hadley is. Like, and I don't know what I'm doing, right? And so going through it, and it's like it'll take you to places that you've never been. Like, you have never been that frustrated about things, and there's things that you don't understand are going on, and it's easy to not do it right. But when you have a group, when you have a brotherhood, when you have like what we have, and we can get together, and it's not just like, oh, you wouldn't believe what my kids did, blah, blah, blah. And again, it's not just like throwing beers back and just talking crap about your family. It's like, this is what I'm really struggling with. I'm really struggling with getting too angry with my kids. And guys, can you be praying for me? Like, I need accountability in this. Next week, can you ask me how I've been doing with this? Can you guys,
call
if
me
I
this
need to,
week. Or,
exactly. And that's the kind of thing that takes you that next step further, because you're not going to be able to figure it out on your own. Maybe you are. I don't know. I think that we're fallen human beings that aren't going to be able to figure it out on our own, and that God uses the men around us in our lives to bring us up.
and that is exactly why it is paramount and important to have men in your life that you can follow with, walk with God with, and they can be there to walk with you.
100%.
Taylor, I seriously thank you for coming out to the house. You guys should have seen the tech issues we were having, how to
Brent's a
work
tech
this out.
wizard now.
But we got this MacBook Air rocking, and I just,
Heck yeah, man.
man, we're on it now. So Taylor, thanks again. This has been an awesome discussion, and I think there's a lot of good points that men could take away from this. I really think that in today's world, if you can have yourself a brother, and brothers plural, that you will be a better man. And that is one of the biggest takeaways that I want to get through Brothers of Merit to all men. So I just remember that, fellas. And thanks again. I really appreciate it, Taylor. And we're gonna end. Remember, guys, that if you like what you hear, head over to Apple. We're on Apple now, so subscribe to the podcast, rate and review it, and we're on all platforms. So check the website out. We're at www.brothersofmerit.com, and we'll be back next week with a cool topic. And you
I
guys
love it.
take care.
Thanks, man.